Ange scratched the back of his neck, staring at the massive, swirling puddle of black liquid on his bedroom floor. Okay, so I definitely died, he muttered to himself, his voice cracking slightly like any normal 16-year-old. And now I'm here. Wherever here is. He caught his reflection in the window. Still the same average kid, messy, dark brown hair and plain brown eyes. No superpowers, no crazy anime hair colors. Except, he wasn't alone. Yo, Ink. Get up here, Ange said. The puddle on the floor rippled. A wolf completely made of thick, midnight black ink rose from the liquid, its form shifting and smoking at the edges. It gave a silent, powerful yawn, its eyes glowing faintly. This was his Shikigami, a creature spawned from his own soul when he woke up in this bizarre new reality. Man, this is wild, Ange said, reaching out to pat the wolf's head. His hand sank slightly into the cool, fluid-like fur before the ink solidified to let him scratch behind its ears. We gotta keep a low profile, all right. I'm pretty sure we are in Tokyo, but things feel off. To test his new partner, Ange pointed at the corner of the room. Sink. Ink instantly melted downward, turning into a flat, circular puddle of ink on the hardwood. The puddle slid rapidly across the floor, completely silent, before flowing up the wall and seeping directly into the shadow cast by the wardrobe. A second later, the wolf stepped fully formed out of the shadow, completely dry and solid. Teleportation via shadows. Broken. Absolutely broken, Ange grinned, feeling a surge of confidence. What else can you do? Dematerialize. The wolf dissolved into a cloud of floating ink droplets, vanishing into thin air, only to reform right next to Ange's leg. Ange looked out the window at the city lights. He didn't know it yet, but this was the world of Highschool DxD, a world crawling with devils, angels, and fallen angels. He was just a regular guy, but with a shadow-stepping, ink-shifting apex predator at his side, he wasn't going to be defenseless. If anything tries to mess with us, Ange whispered, looking at Ink's razor-sharp, pitch-black fangs, you just bite 'em hard. The next morning, Ange stared at his reflection in the mirror while tying his school tie. He still had his completely average dark brown hair and brown eyes, but his life was officially weird. Look, man, Ange said, looking down at his own shadow. Kuo Academy is apparently crawling with literal devils. If they see a giant ink wolf walking around, we are completely cooked. You stay hidden in my shadow unless I absolutely say otherwise. Got it? The shadow beneath his feet rippled slightly in response. Ange grabbed his school bag and headed out. Walking onto the campus of Kuo Academy, he immediately felt out of place. The school had only recently gone co-ed, and the guys here were famously desperate. As he walked through the gates, he kept his head down, blending perfectly into the crowd as just another random 16-year-old. Yo, did you see Ria's grammar this morning? A student nearby whispered. Ange's ears perked up. Ria's grammar. He knew that name. She was the top idol of the school, but more importantly, a high-ranking devil. He needed to avoid her at all costs. As he walked down the hallway toward his classroom, a sudden, heavy chill ran down his spine. The air felt thick. He looked out the hallway window and saw a guy with a creepy smirk standing near the bicycle racks, wearing a trench coat despite the warm weather. The guy's eyes locked onto Ange. It was a fallen angel scout, looking for humans with unusual power. Ange felt a sudden, aggressive surge of energy radiating from his own feet. Inside his shadow, Ink was growling, desperate to leap out, slide across the floor, and tear the creepy guy to pieces. Down, boy, Ange muttered under his breath, clenching his fists. He forced his eyes away from the window and kept walking, keeping his composure. He couldn't let anyone know what he was hiding. He ignored the urge to summon his partner, buried the power deep down, and slid right into his classroom, taking a seat in the very back row by the window. He survived the morning, but he knew keeping ink suppressed wasn't going to be easy. The morning bell rang, and class finally began. For the next few hours, Ange forced himself to stare at the chalkboard, desperately trying to look like he was paying attention to math formulas. Underneath his desk, his shadow vibrated faintly. Ink was completely restless, but Ange kept his boots firmly planted over the darkest part of the shadow, silently telling the wolf to chill out. When the lunch bell finally rings, Ange exhales a massive sigh of relief. He grabs his convenience store bento box and heads out into the bustling courtyard to find a quiet place to eat. As he walks through the crowded hallway, a girl suddenly turns the corner, completely distracted by a map in her hands. OOF. She bumps straight into Ange, sending her papers flying across the floor. I am so sorry. I wasn't looking where I was going, she gasps, immediately dropping to her knees to gather her things. Nah, you're good. My bad too, Ange says, dropping down to help her pick up the papers. He looks at her properly. She is wearing the standard Kuo Academy girl's uniform, sporting twin chestnut-colored pigtails, and carrying a cheerful, energetic smile. She looks completely normal, just another average high school student. He has absolutely no idea she is Irina Shidu, a devout agent of the church, and an actual angel's vanguard. Thanks so much, she says, beaming at him as he hands her the last folder. I'm still trying to get used to the layout here. I'm Irina. I'm Ange. You're a transfer student, he asks, his 16-year-old brain completely missing any spiritual cues because she smells faintly of normal sweet convenience store bread, not holy light. Yep. Just started. Irina chirps, dusting off her skirt. She blinks, looking down at Ange's feet for a brief second. Down in the dark silhouette of the hallway, Ink senses the immense, hidden holy energy radiating from Irina. The ink puddle beneath Ange's shoes violently bubbles, throwing off tiny, microscopic droplets of dark vapor. Ink's lethal instincts scream at him to leap out of the floor and bite. Ange feels the sudden, freezing spike of adrenaline from his shadow and quickly steps backward into the light, forcing Ink's presence to snap shut. He breaks out into a nervous sweat. Anyway, nice meeting you, Irina. I gotta go eat lunch before the roof gets crowded. Oh, okay. See you around, Ange. Irina waves cheerfully, completely oblivious to the shadow-manipulating Shikigami that was just inches from her ankles. Ange walks away fast, his heart pounding in his chest. Man, that was way too close, he thinks, wiping his forehead. What is up with this school? Even the normal-looking girls are making Ink go crazy. Ange manages to escape to a quiet, sunlit bench on the edge of the courtyard. He opens his bento box and starts eating, forcing himself to breathe normally. The bright sunlight helps keep his shadow small and compressed, making it much easier to keep Ink locked down. Dude, seriously, chill, Ange mutters quietly under his breath, poking a piece of chicken with his chopsticks. You're gonna get us caught before day one even ends. The tiny shadow beneath his bench gives a faint, frustrated ripple, but the wolf finally settles. For the rest of the lunch break, nobody bothers him. He just blends into the background, watching groups of students laugh and chat, completely oblivious to the supernatural chaos hiding in the school. When the afternoon bell rings, Ange heads back inside. The rest of the school day goes by surprisingly normally. He sits through history, pretends to understand classical literature, and watches the clock tick down. There are no sudden devil attacks, no fallen angels crashing through the windows, and Irina doesn't cross his path again. It is just the boring, mundane routine of a 16-year-old student. When the final bell echoes through the hallways, signifying the end of classes, Ange packs his bags as fast as humanly possible. He slings his backpack over his shoulder and walks out of the front gates, letting out a massive breath he feels like he's been holding all day. He survived his first normal day at Kuo Academy. As the sun begins to set, casting long, deep shadows across the streets, Ange walks down a quiet alleyway on his route home. With no one else around, he relaxes his grip on his power. Suddenly, a thick, fluid-like black liquid seeps out from his feet. Ink's massive, shadowy head emerges directly from the pavement, letting out a silent, jaw-cracking yawn before sliding across the asphalt like a living puddle, staying safely hidden in the twilight. Yeah, good boy, Ange chuckles, cracking his knuckles. We made it. But man, tomorrow is gonna be exhausting. Ange finally made it back to his empty house, locking the front door securely behind him. He threw his school bag onto the couch, and walked into the center of his living room. The house was dead quiet. All right, Ink. Time to see what else we can do, Ange said, his 16-year-old voice filled with excitement. He had been thinking about this all day during his boring classes. Ange focused his energy, and a thick, dark puddle of ink instantly spread across the hardwood floor. Slowly, the black liquid bubbled and took shape. First, Ink's long snout broke through the surface of the puddle. Next, the rest of the wolf's head emerged, up to his pointed ears, followed by the bottom of his jaw. But Ink wasn't barking or growling. Clamped tightly between the wolf's razor-sharp teeth was something long and wrapped in shadow. Whoa, you can store stuff. Ange muttered, his eyes going wide. He reached down and took hold of the handle protruding from Ink's mouth. As he pulled, the ink slid off the weapon like water off a raincoat. Ange stood up straight, holding a brand new weapon. It was a stunning katana. The handle was a deep, matte black that felt perfect in his grip, but the blade itself was a vibrant, shimmering ocean blue that caught the light of the living room lamp. It looked incredibly sharp and hummed with a strange, cool energy. Dude, this is sick. Ange grinned, swinging the ocean blue blade through the air. It made a crisp swoosh sound. A shadow inventory. We are definitely getting somewhere now. Ink fully pulled the rest of his body out of the puddle, shaking his ink fur out before sitting down on the floor, looking up at Ange as if waiting for his next command. Ange wiped down the glowing ocean blue blade, completely amazed by it. All right, Ink, keep this safe for me, he said. He held the katana out. Ink opened his jaws, and Ange slid the weapon back into the wolf's mouth. The dark liquid enveloped the blade, swallowing it whole. Ink swallowed hard, and the weapon completely disappeared back into his shadow inventory. With a final command, the wolf dissolved into a flat puddle, slid across the floor, and snapped right back into Ange's normal shadow. Ange collapsed onto his bed, totally wiped out from the stress of his first day, and quickly fell asleep. The next morning, the bright sun woke him up. Ange got dressed, threw on his Kuo Academy uniform, and walked out the door for day 2. The morning walk to school was surprisingly peaceful. He didn't see any weird guys in trench coats, and the atmosphere felt totally normal. When he walked through the school gates, he felt a lot more relaxed than yesterday. He was just walking down the main hallway toward his locker when a familiar, energetic voice called out. Good morning, Ange. He turned around and saw Irina running up to him, her twin pigtails bouncing. She was smiling brightly and wearing her uniform perfectly. Hey, Irina. Morning, Ange replied, flashing a casual, 16-year-old wave. Right at that moment, Ange felt a familiar, icy shiver travel up his spine. Down in his shadow, Ink immediately woke up. The ink puddle beneath Ange's shoes began to ripple violently. Ink could taste the massive, hidden holy energy radiating from Irina again, and his predatory instincts were screaming at him to leap out, slide across the floor, and scratch. Ange froze, forcing his feet flat against the ground to keep the ink from bubbling over. He broke into a sudden cold sweat. Bro, not again, he thought frantically, trying to keep a straight face. You find your way around the school okay yesterday? He asked, trying to sound normal while keeping his killer shadow wolf locked down. Oh, yeah. I found everything just fine. Irina chirped, completely missing the absolute panic in Ange's eyes. Before Ange could even reply, a loud, frantic screaming echoed down the hallway. "Get back here, you perverts," an angry girl shouted from around the corner. A split second later, a guy with messy brown hair came sprinting down the corridor at max speed, a look of pure, unadulterated terror on his face. It was Issei Hyudu. He was running for his literal life, clutching a digital camera to his chest while a couple of furious members of the girls' kendo club chased him with wooden swords. "Out of the way! Out of the way!" Issei yelled, completely blind to who was in front of him. He ran straight between Ange and Irina, his shoulder clipping Ange hard enough to spin him around. The sudden impact totally broke Ange's concentration. With his focus shattered, his grip on his power slipped for a split second. Splat! A tiny, thick puddle of pure black ink violently shot out from beneath Ange's shoe, splashing right onto the polished linoleum floor directly between his and Irina's feet. The dark liquid hissed faintly, bubbling like it was alive. Irina stopped smiling. Her eyes instantly dropped to the bizarre puddle, her cheerful expression shifting into one of confusion and subtle alertness. The latent holy energy inside her body hummed, sensing a trace of something strange. Ange's heart dropped into his stomach. "Oh, I am so cooked," his 16-year-old brain screamed. He quickly slammed his foot down right on top of the ink puddle, dragging his soul across the floor to smear it and make it look like a normal mess. "Ah man. Dang it, Issei!" Ange yelled, faking a voice full of frustration. He grabbed a tissue from his pocket and frantically started wiping his shoe. "My pen. It completely exploded in my pocket because that dude bumped into me. Look at this mess." Irina blinked, her tense expression instantly melting back into her usual bright, cheerful smile. "Oh, wow. That really sucks," she said, looking down at his shoe. "Those cheap convenience store pens are the absolute worst. They always leak when you least expect it." Ange let out a massive, silent breath of relief. "Oh thank God, she actually bought it," his 16-year-old brain cheered. He kept wiping his shoe with the tissue, making sure every last trace of ink's physical form was rubbed away into the paper. Down below, Ink finally calmed down, sensing that the immediate danger of being discovered had passed. "Yeah, tell me about it," Ange grumbled, tossing the ink-stained tissue into a nearby trash can. "Issei and his friends are literal walking disasters. You gotta watch out for them around here." "Haha, I'll definitely keep that in mind." Irina giggled, checking the hallway clock. "Oh, the warning bell. I gotta run to homeroom. See you around, Ange." She gave him a quick wave and jogged down the hall, her pigtails bouncing. Ange leaned against the lockers, waiting for his heart rate to slow down. "Man, that was way too close," he muttered to his shadow. "No more slipping up." He straightens his uniform jacket and walks into his classroom just as the final bell rings, settling into his desk for another long day of hiding his power. Ange slid into his seat in the back row right as the teacher walked through the door. He slumped down in his chair, trying to look as invisible as possible while the homeroom teacher started droning on about upcoming exams. Underneath his desk, the classroom was slightly dark, creating a perfect shadow. Ange kept his eyes glued to the blackboard, but his mind was running a mile a minute. He could feel ink resting quietly right beneath his sneakers. The wolf had completely calmed down after Irina left, shrinking back into a flat, harmless silhouette on the floor. "All right, turn your textbooks to page 42, the teacher commanded, chalk scraping loudly against the board. 1. Ange reached into his bag, pulled out his book, and flipped the pages. For the next few hours, he forced himself to play the part of a totally normal 16-year-old student. He took notes when he needed to, stared out the window when he got bored, and ignored the occasional loud shouts coming from Issei's classroom down the hall. Even though he knew this school was a hotbed for supernatural entities, sitting in class felt remarkably mundane. The sun slowly tracked across the sky, casting long, shifting shadows across the classroom floor. Every time the shadows stretched, Ange subtly shifted his feet, keeping Ink perfectly contained and hidden from the rest of the world. By the time the bell finally rang to signal the end of afternoon classes, Ange hadn't dropped his guard once. He survived the entire day without a single slip-up. The next morning marked day 3 of Ange's new life. By now, he was getting used to the routine. He woke up, tied his school tie, and gave his shadow a firm look before heading out. The walk to Kuo Academy was totally quiet, and he managed to get through his morning classes without any major drama. When the lunch bell rang, Ange immediately grabbed his convenience store bread and made a break for the courtyard. He just wanted a peaceful spot to relax. He found a secluded bench near the edge of the school building, sat down, and tore open his food packaging. "All right, Ink," Ange whispered casually to his feet. "Just chill in the shade. It's a nice day." The shadow beneath his bench gave a faint, smooth ripple. Knowing they needed to be smart after the incident with Irina, Ink stayed completely put, compressed tightly into a perfectly normal-looking silhouette on the asphalt. Crunch! The sound of someone loudly biting into a white, fluffy bar of chocolate echoed from just a few feet away. Ange froze. He slowly turned his head to the side. Sitting on the very same bench, completely deadpan, was Koneko Tuju. She was wearing the standard school uniform, her short white hair framing her face, and her small, doll-like expression totally blank. He hadn't even heard her walk up. Ange's heart did a quick flutter. He knew who she was, a powerhouse devil from the Occult Research Club. He braced himself, expecting his shadow to go wild like it did before. But down below, Ink stayed absolutely locked down. The wolf trusted Ange's command from the morning, remaining totally still and flat against the ground. Not a single droplet of ink bubbled up. Not a single trace of shadow energy leaked out. Ange let out a tiny, invisible sigh of relief, though he still felt a bit nervous sitting next to someone so dangerous. He took a casual bite of his bread, trying to act like a totally normal 16-year-old. Koneko didn't say anything at first. She just kept staring straight ahead, chewing her chocolate bar with a completely blank face. The silence between them stretched on for a solid minute, completely awkward. Finally, Koneko glanced sideways at him, her sharp golden eyes scanning his completely average appearance. "Hey," she said, her voice totally flat and quiet. "Ah hey," Ange replied, offering a casual wave. "Nice weather today, huh? Do you have any more of that?" Koneko asked, her voice completely flat as she pointed a small, pale finger at his convenience store bread. Ange blinked, his 16-year-old brain taking a second to process that a literal superhuman devil girl was asking him for food. He looked down at his plastic wrapper. He had bought a 2-pack of sweet cream buns, and he hadn't touched the second one yet. "Oh? Ah yeah, actually. Here," Ange said, pulling the second bun out of the wrapper and handing it over. Koneko took it without a word. She carefully unwrapped it, took a small, neat bite, and chewed slowly. A tiny, almost unnoticeable spark of satisfaction lit up her doll-like eyes. "Thanks," she muttered, kicking her short legs slightly against the edge of the bench. "No problem," Ange replied, taking another bite of his own lunch. He kept his feet perfectly still, making sure his shadow didn't move an inch. Ink remained totally locked down and quiet under his sneakers, perfectly mimicking a normal shadow in the bright afternoon sun. For the rest of the lunch break, the two of them just sat there on the bench in complete, quiet companionability, eating their bread. To anyone else walking by, Ange just looked like another regular kid hanging out, completely unaware of the supernatural world. When the afternoon warning bell finally rang, Koneko stood up, brushing a few stray crumbs off her school skirt. She gave Ange one last, blank look. "See you around," she said, before turning and walking away toward the main building. Ange leaned back against the bench, letting out a breath. "Good job, Ink," he whispered to his feet. "We actually pulled off a completely normal interaction." The shadow beneath him gave a proud, subtle twitch. Ange survived the rest of the school day with no issues, packing his bags quickly when the final bell rang. He walked out of the school gates and decided to take a slightly different route home, through a quiet courtyard near the old school building, wanting to avoid the crowds of students. As he turned a corner near the dense rows of trees, he suddenly sensed a presence. He looked up and froze. Walking right toward him was Akino Himejima. She was the vice president of the Occult Research Club, famously known as the ultimate, sadistic priestess of the school, and an incredibly powerful half-fallen angel. Her long black hair was tied into her signature high ponytail, and she had a gentle, elegant smile on her face as she carried a stack of documents. Ange's 16-year-old brain immediately went into hyper-alert mode. "Oh great, another VIP of the devil world," he thought frantically. Down below, Ink felt the massive, overlapping weight of her demonic and lightning-infused holy energy. It was a completely overwhelming aura. But Ink remembered his training from lunch. The wolf stayed absolutely locked down. Not a single ripple disturbed the dark silhouette beneath Ange's shoes. Ink remained perfectly still, compressing his presence to zero. Akino stopped as she noticed him blocking the narrow path. Her violet eyes scanned him, blinking in mild surprise at running into a student in this quiet area. "Oh my," Akino murmured, her voice carrying its usual playful, mature tone. "I don't see many students coming down this path after class. Are you lost, freshman?" "Ah no, just taking the scenic route home," Ange replied, giving a perfectly casual, slightly awkward teenage shrug. He kept his posture relaxed, showing absolutely no fear or strange energy. Akino giggled softly, a sound that sent a slight chill down his spine despite her kind smile. "Is that so? Well, be careful not to stay on campus too late. Strange things can happen when the sun goes down." "Yeah, definitely. Good to know. Have a good evening, senpai," Ange said, politely stepping off the path into the grass to give her plenty of room to pass. "Ara, what a polite boy," Akino smiled, walking past him with her grace intact. She didn't sense a single thing out of the ordinary, completely oblivious to the lethal ink wolf hiding in his shadow. Ange waited until she completely vanished around the corner before letting out a massive sigh of relief, wiping the sudden sweat from his forehead. "2 for 2, Ink," he whispered, looking down. "We are getting way too good at this." The next morning marked day 4. Ange walked through the school gates, feeling like an absolute stealth master. He had successfully dodged Ria's, Irina, Koneko, and Akino without leaking a single drop of ink. "We are basically invisible, Ink," Ange muttered, adjusting his school bag. The shadow under his sneakers gave a smooth, confident ripple. That confidence lasted exactly until lunch break. Ange was walking near the main courtyard entrance when he heard a loud, familiar, and incredibly embarrassing commotion. "I'm telling you, it's a revolutionary tactical maneuver." Issei Hyudu's voice echoed across the pavement. Ange peeked around the corner and immediately facepalmed. Issei was on his knees, desperately trying to look up the skirt of a girl standing near the lockers. Next to him, his pervert buddies, Matsuda and Motohama, were holding up a small hand mirror on the tip of a broomstick, sweating profusely like they were defusing a bomb. It was peak 16-year-old pervert nonsense. But the girl they were targeting wasn't a normal student. Standing there with a completely deadpan, judging look was Zenobia Quarter. She was wearing a standard Kuo Academy uniform, but her short, blue hair with a distinct green streak made her stand out instantly. Even without her usual Excalibur destruction sword wrapped on her back, she radiated a sharp, intense, and rigid holy aura. Your spatial awareness is severely lacking, Zenobia said, her voice cold and completely serious. Before Issei could grab his mirror, Zenobia calmly raised her foot and delivered a brutal, lightning-fast kick directly to Issei's face. Crack! Issei flew backward into a row of recycling bins, plastic bottles flying everywhere. Matsuda and Motohama screamed in terror, and bolted down the hallway like frightened gazelles, leaving their broom mirror behind. Ange couldn't help but chuckle at the absolute chaos. But as he turned to quietly slip away, Zenovia's sharp eyes snapped over to him. She walked right past the groaning Issei, her uniform skirt fluttering, and stopped directly in front of Ange. Down in his shadow, Ink instantly reacted to the heavy, battle-hardened church energy radiating from her. The wolf's killer instincts flared, wanting to leap out, slide across the floor, and sink its teeth into her leg. Ange immediately slammed his core energy down, forcing his feet flat. Stay down, he repeated in his head, keeping his face completely blank. Ink trusted the command and locked himself down, completely mimicking a flat, normal shadow. Zenobia stared at Ange for a long 3 seconds. You, she said, her expression rigid. You witnessed that display of degeneracy. Tell me, are all males in this territory so fundamentally broken in the head? Ange blinked, his casual 16-year-old brain kicking into survival mode. Honestly, senpai. Yeah, pretty much. Those 3 are a special breed of stupid. I usually just pretend they don't exist. Zenobia let out a small, satisfied breath, crossing her arms. An acceptable assessment. At least one local possesses a shred of sanity. She gave him a stiff, formal nod, completely oblivious to the lethal ink predator hiding right beneath his boots, and walked right past him to report the pervert trio to the student council. Ange looked down at his shadow, wiping a bead of sweat from his temple. Man, this school is a literal circus. Zenobia marched straight down the hallway toward the third-floor library, her mind completely boggled by the sheer degeneracy she had just witnessed. After reporting Issei and his friends to the student council, she needed to speak to her king. As a former church warrior, who had recently reincarnated into a devil in Ria's Gremory's peerage, Zenobia was still trying to understand the bizarre customs of the underworld, and more importantly, the bizarre behavior of Ria's pawn. 1. She pushed open the doors to the occult research club room. Ria's Gremory was sitting at her elegant desk, signing a stack of club paperwork, while Akino poured a fresh cup of tea. Koneko was sitting on the couch, quietly munching on a chocolate bar. Ria's, Zenobia said, walking straight up to the desk and crossing her arms. Her face was deadpan and completely serious. We need to discuss the mental fortitude of your pawn. Ria's paused her pen, looking up with a gentle, slightly amused smile. Good afternoon, Zenobia. Let me guess. Issei? Yes, Zenobia stated firmly. He was attempting a highly synchronized espionage maneuver with a mirror and a broomstick to look up my skirt. I was forced to neutralize him into a row of recycling bins. Akino let out a soft, melodic giggle. Ara, Issei-kun is as energetic as always. Koneko didn't look up from her chocolate, but she muttered a single, flat word, pervert. Ria's pinched the bridge of her nose, letting out a heavy sigh. I apologize, Zenobia. I am constantly trying to discipline him, but his dragon nature makes his desire aggressive. Did anyone else witness this embarrassment? Only one, Zenobia replied, shifting her posture. A normal human student. A freshman male with dark brown hair and brown eyes.